Okay, so now in this video, let's try to understand the Nestjs helper modules to implement authentication, right? So Nestjs, I mean, you might have heard about Passport with the Express Node.js, right? So Nestjs provides its integration. I mean, it is providing its own module like Nestjs Passport, Nestjs CWT, which provide a lot of different strategies like local strategy, which helps with the when you are doing authentication with the username password. And that's what we are doing. We are doing a simple session based authentication demo with the Nestjs, TypeORM, Passport, Redis, where we are going to allow user to enter the username password. Session created, now use the same session to access any protected routes. So how Nestjs can help us? Nestjs already has this passport module which provides us all these things. So Nestjs Passport provides passport strategies. You need to install all these modules: Passport, Passport Local, or Nestjs Passport. And implementing the passport strategies are simple. Here we created a user service, which is just a mock, and this is our auth service, which is just validating the user from the mock data. So you create a auth service, and this is here local strategy. So Passport provide these different strategies. This strategy works just for username password. You enter username password and it will validate for you. Now we also need to understand the actual flow, how all these things are connected. So we have a user module, auth module, and the passport, an express session, right? So we will write a authentication route in the auth module, auth controller. We will write a user sign up inside a user module, user controller, and this passport strategy, passport, auth guard, or serializer will be part of the authentication module. So here you can see we are adding a passport module as a dependency, and then you can write these controllers like simple auth controller for login. If you are able to successfully log in through the local strategy, you can just access the user from the request object. So here we are setting auth guard local. It will be using a local strategy, which is taking username password. So this is the flow which I am talking here. So client will send a login request with the email and a password. It will directly go to the local strategy because we are using passport. Local strategy will validate. It has a validate user method. It takes a username and password. I mean, email is again a username. Don't get confused here. In the passport, by default, it takes username and a password as a 2 argument for the login. So it's username password. Local strategy again using auth service to validate. Auth service, it will validate everything is good, user is exist, user password is valid. This auth service will return a user, and that user will go to the passport. Passport will initialize, passport will serialize that user and set that user inside a session. Okay, and if you are using the Redis to persist the session, then serialized user will overall we are using express session, and that session will be stored inside a Redis. So this is overall the flow, or you can see all these building blocks, how they are connected. So let's now try to plug and play. So what all things we need here is, so we are going to create a user entity because we need somehow to store some mechanism to store the user attributes, I mean the sign up mechanism. So here in this section, let's talk about user module, user entity, user controller, user service, which will allow us to onboard a user in the database, where user can log in with the user can sign up with the email and a password. Okay, so this is a simple user service we are writing, which is just using TypeORM. Here we are not talking about how TypeORM works, but injectable export class user service. Inside constructor, you inject the repository, private user repository, and then just write a helper methods like find by email, create user, update user, delete user, find by ID. So because you can also find using find one by email, find one by ID, or create will help us to create a user in database, that user repository.save. And so this is a simple user service we have. Now next thing we are going to do is user module and a user controller. So this is our simple controller, user controller users, export class user controller. Inside this user controller, we will inject the user service, and we will define all the routes like sign up. Sign up is create user. Create user will pass a username and password or email password. So we need to define the DTO. I mean, when you want to pass a body, it's better to create a DTO. So create user DTO we can define inside user.dto.ts, which has 3 arguments: email, password or role. Okay. First of all, for this, we need to add a class validator. Now, what is the role of class validator? Class validator helps us to validate the request body. So here, install the class validator so that we will say, okay, email should be of type email, password should be of some constraint you can add, role should not be empty. So just add the class validator and then you should be able to import the class validator like all these things. Update the entity. Inside entity, now we will have all these attributes which are like email, password or role. So that's our user entity. Inside user entity, now we have ID. ID can be of auto-generated or UUID. That depends on how you define email, password and role. And so we have just entity and create user DTO. We'll rename it to the user controller.ts and then we'll also define. So just import the DTO here and just write a simple code which is nothing but creating a user by hashing the password. So await this user service.find. Let's find the user with existing email. If it doesn't exist, then that's good. If it already exists, conflict exception. Otherwise, create the hash version of the password. Now also here, if you are using bcrypt has some complication because it's a native library with the C and C++. So always use bcrypt.js. Also, I face the same thing. It's better to just change the bcrypt to the bcrypt.js. So first we are creating the hash version of the password and then we are just doing user service.create. We already have a create method. Just pass the existing payload, override the password and the role. By default, you can set the role equal to user. Okay, password is a hash password. And once the user is created, return it successfully. And now our simple user module, which contains, okay, inside a user module, just put a type ORM module.4 feature, user service, user controller, and exports user service. A simple user service we have created. Let's add this user module inside our main module, domain module. So another thing is you also need to pass the entity database module.for root and pass this user entity so that because we have set the database module synchronized true. What is this synchronized, false or true? Synchronized false means do not refresh the database on change of the entities. But for development local, we can just set it to true. What it will do is when you start the application, it will check, okay, you have created entity. Based on that, it will apply the change in the database. All the mod changing like truncating the columns, renaming the columns, changing the constraint. So this is what it does. You should not use this in the production because this is not safe because it directly apply the change in your database by looking at the entities. You should use migrations for that. So here we'll just do npm run start and it will update the database. It will just create the tables and all the sort of operations it will perform. Some error with the bcrypt. Okay, I need to fix it. Just replace this bcrypt native library to bcrypt.js. Bcrypt.js also provides the same thing. And we will just start the application again. And here we have entity, module, service, and controller. In the domain module, we have registered it. The synchronize is true. So let's start the application again. So these are like let's say if I want to use a new column address, what will happen when you restart the application or start the application? It will alter the database table based on what you are adding inside entity. Logging also we need to make true so that we can also see the logs which are happening in the type ORM. Otherwise, you won't see the type ORM logs, whatever the query it is running to update the database table. Let's say I'm just adding some random columns just to show you the logs which are being generated through type ORM. So you can see here and the last line, alter table user, add user column username. If you see the last line, so this is running these queries. So this is called, you don't need migrations, you are just syncing the database directly. So this is all we have. We have actually created entities and user controller, user sign up. So we can just now use APIs to create user in our database.